performing with us for the first time, though he's performed many other places, just not here, is, I actually have to confess, I don't know much about him, but I have it on very good authority that I will not regret this. So I'm looking forward to it. If he's half as entertaining as his sometime performing partner Dan was, this is going to be great. So please welcome Mike Finley.
You're going to know a lot in a minute.
Good.
I don't really have a story. But I'm kind of sick, so there's a little continuance from Lauren's story. I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself. This is something I've never...
Can you speak up just a little?
That's a good point. I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself, something that I've never told any of my friends about. I want to thank you guys all for coming tonight. I think it's wonderful that those of you that don't know me show the character to come out and listen to me. But even more character is shown by those people who do know me. And they came out. This is the story of my life in 8 pictures. This is me at age 11. I was a very happy little boy. I grew up in Ohio. My folks rented a house in an apple orchard. So I grew up climbing apple trees and having a good time, enjoying life with my father, my mother, my sister, and my 2 brothers. And things were going well. My grandma said she was trying to sum up what kind of boy I was, and she said, "He's sunny, but complicated." That's probably the last laugh I'm going to get here. When I was 12 years old, 11 years old, my sister died. She was 15 years old, Kathleen. She was a wonderful person, and she was a good friend to me and a wonderful sister, lovely sense of humor. Everybody loved her. When she died, it wasn't just a tragedy for our family, losing a 15-year-old girl. She died because she went to the dentist, and an abscess was lanced, and she went into shock and into a coma and died very unexpectedly. The whole town mourned. We had a funeral, and I'm this sunny but complicated kid. I'm sitting in the front row at the funeral, and I look up at the balconies in the church, and people are looking at me so solemnly, and I smiled. And I was embarrassed. I was shy. Anyway, I regretted that moment terribly because I became the object of bullying for the next year. I was in the 8th grade. Things were going really terrible. My mother started to kind of lose her brain. She was working 3 jobs, selling Mutual of Omaha and waiting on tables. And she was just losing it and becoming very harsh with us. My sister had died. My father had been waiting for this opportunity for years, and he came to the house one day and told me he was leaving. He was going to California. And I was 11 years old, and I said, why? Why are you leaving? What did I do? Did I do something? And he waited a minute. He said, no, it's nothing to do with you. But, kids feel responsible. They take blame for that kind of thing. He took off for California, didn't tell anybody that he'd been blackballed in his industry, the automobile industry, because he took some money from an expense account. So he had to start over again somewhere else, but he wouldn't tell me that. So I began to think, what can I do? I got to get out of this. It's terrible. And I went to a Catholic school. My father was Catholic, my mother was not. And there was a vocational counselor. That's somebody who recruits people for the priesthood, coming through town. And they said, does anybody want to do that? And all the kids who were like day-to-day altar boys put up their hands. And I'd never done anything like that. I didn't give a crap about being an altar boy. But I said, yeah. And I went to the meeting, and I met this man. He looks kind of like Drew Carey. He's from Cleveland. His name is Ralph. He was 19, and I was 12, 13. And he proceeded to give me the full rush, the full treatment. He wooed me. And he came to the house and had dinner with my family. He took us to a ball game with the Indians. The seminary he was talking about is in Philadelphia, and if you watched the Indians play, that would make you want to go to Philadelphia. And he said, "You're really going to like it. You're going to like it." He invited me for a sleepover at his folks' house in Cleveland. That was so weird, sleeping in Dick Van Dyke and those kinds of TV beds. And he supplied me with liquor. I'm like 13 years old. He's giving me rums and cokes, which I hated. He took me to a place called, what was it called? Euclid Beach Park in Cleveland. Not there anymore. But they had this incredible rickety wooden roller coaster. And I was kind of rattled, and I said, "I think that's really exciting, but I'm afraid. I just know I'll feel terrible if I go on a roller coaster." And he took me by the shoulders, put his hands on my shoulders, and he said, "Mike, there's a secret to being on a roller coaster, and not everybody knows what it is." And I said, "What's the secret, Ralph?" He said, "Scream like hell and laugh like you're enjoying it. And then we look at each other, and it is fun, and it is funny, and somehow you overcome it by pretending that it's funny." So this was a recipe for bravado, but it worked. We went on this Cyclone, the Thriller, all the roller coasters they had, and I felt terrific. I felt empowered. And so at a certain point, I left my family, drove with another boy's family to Bucks County, Pennsylvania, close to Philadelphia, and I joined this seminary. I was 13 years old. When you want to think about child abuse and all the stuff that happened in the Catholic Church, think about 13-year-old seminarians going off to school without their parents. This is what the school looked like. It was called St. Mary's Manor. It was in a town called Langhorne, Pennsylvania. And it had this kind of The Shining kind of hotel. And this is where all the priests who are the Order of the Society of Mary, they lived there. And us boys, and we were a record large class, 70. Everybody thought, wow, the Catholic Church is really going places. It's really going to gather steam now and become super, super popular. And that's where the priests lived, and this is where we lived. It's sort of like a freezer compartment. Study hall on the bottom, and then lockers and places to brush your teeth, and then bunks up on top. And it was just a wonderful place. Other kids were getting homesick and crying and missed their moms. Older kids, like 14-year-olds. But me, I felt just completely liberated to be away. And I loved everything about it. You wake up at 5:30 in the morning and you walk silently. You're not allowed to talk. You walk in the dark across this wooden boardwalk to the chapel. And inside the chapel, it's very religious and incense burning, and there's a duck pond out there, ducks quacking in the dark. It was just thrilling and romantic to me. I loved it. I even loved the kids because there were no bullies. Back in Ohio, I was bullied because I was smaller than other kids and younger a little bit because I skipped a grade. But all these kids were pretty nice. So I really liked it. When you were in the chapel, they had no paddings on the kneelers. Have you ever been to Catholic church? They got paddings. And I was like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to do this. It's really, really hard on my kneecaps. But we got used to it. Your knees develop calluses after about a week, and you don't even think about it. I kneel on stone and stuff all the time. It's not a problem for me. And about this time, I made a friend. And this friend is not this guy. Oh, I neglected to tell you. On the altar stone in this chapel, there was something that we looked at all the time when we were kneeling on the hard nose, and it was a mosaic. The altar's here. There's a mosaic, And we were all staring at it, and it was a picture of a pelican. And the pelican has its young arrayed around it, and it's pecking its breast, and blood is spurting out on the mosaic. And these are some strange birds because the babies are eating the mother's blood. And this is an image for Jesus and salvation. And that really made an impression on me because it was gross, but it was also very powerful and kind of Wagnerian. My wife asked for a copy. But I made a friend about this time, and I'll show you him. The other guy's name was Ralph. This guy's name was Bob. And he was kind of an effeminate fellow. Robert Dubiel is from Oak Park, Illinois. And he started teaching me things. My vocabulary started to improve, and I became aware of concepts like liberal and democratic and things like that, which was very helpful when things like this happened. This is the Kennedys. This is the day of the assassination in November of 1963. I was out playing soccer with a bunch of other kids, and the caretaker of the building brought a radio, and we heard the terrible news, and we thought it was some sort of joke, but it wasn't. And we just stood around like crushed young men watching the TV for the next 3, 4, 5 days. Just things got worse and worse and worse and worse. And we were so optimistic about the future of Catholicism in America, and we were going to have a pipeline to the Pope, to the White House, and it was going to be great. But it wasn't going to happen. You only had to look at Lyndon Johnson. Here's a picture of that pelican, by the way, pecking its breast. Very instructive image. Now, we were very depressed for a while after Kennedy died. I was down in the kind of ping pong area, in an area we called the catacombs, and we had a big radio. It was an old radio, like from the 1940s. And I heard a song, and it was "I Saw Her Standing There." This was 1963, and these were the Beatles. And I heard it, and I thought, wow, that's incredible. The Beatles' voices, their harmonies were so great, and the beat was great, and it was loud. 1, 2, 3, 4. They say that if the Beatles had done nothing but record the one song, "I Saw Her Standing There," that they'd still be immortal to us because it was such a great song. 1, 2, 3, 4. Anyway, a lot of us in the seminary started thinking, well, I like the Pope and I like the church, but I like the Beatles too, that's pretty great. And so there was a lot of wavering about that point. So I'm going to leave that for a second. I'll tell you about my history class. I really like my classes. I like Latin. Whoyas, hic, haec, hoc. Anyone? There we go. This demonstrative fellow here on the far left. We call it demonstrative pronouns. This is my history teacher. His name was George Wallace. And he's the villain of the piece. He wasn't a bad fellow. He fancied himself sort of a Jesuit, fierce and intellectually uncompromising. We're in his class, and he's talking about the Lithuanian Empire, which was news to all of us. He was Lithuanian, so he really stressed Lithuania in his world history class. And I suddenly felt lit up. I had an epiphany of an idea. I said, "Father Wallace, why should we believe you?" Because I was wrestling with this idea that history comes through a point of view, and you have to know the point of view of the history. History is made up by the victors and all this. I was processing all this, and to me that was very amazing. Bob Dubiel, the other guy, was a reason why I was having these very bizarre thoughts. And Father Wallace said, "Come see me in my room after class." I said, "Oh, that's great. I'll have a little conversation about this is history, historicity, and all this." So I went up to the 3rd floor of the first building, the Shining building, and he answers the door, and he starts berating me. "Who do you think you are? Don't you know I'm a priest of God? Don't you know I'm a historian and I'm trained in this? Do you think I would lie to you?" And then he started to beat me. And he balled his hands up, kind of like hammers, and he went at me, and I would say he struck me 11 or 12 times. And it didn't Didn't mark me in any way, but it was a bummer, and I felt bad. Well, the next day I went to class and life resumed, and I didn't feel too badly about it, but I thought, oh, that didn't go well at all. And then something else happened. My friendship with Bob Dubiel sort of deepened. We became more exclusive. We hung around less with other kids, and we just walked around the pond, and we talked, and we laughed. We wrote very funny plays. We wrote very satirical plays about people in the seminary, fundraisers and priests, and wouldn't you believe it, it fell into the wrong hands. These notebooks that we were passing around in our study hall. And one day Bob and I were down in the music room, and I was listening to Louie Louie, and after it was over, he put on a 78 record, and it was Scheherazade, Rimsky-Korsakov. And he took a piece of drape, and he put it around his neck, and trailed it around the room, and he began dancing around the room. And I'm sitting on the couch watching this, and I'm thinking, wow, I don't understand that. And that was just Bob. But other people in the school knew about Bob, and they had their eye on him and thought it was a little unusual, not good. And the rector, the very top guy, called me up to his office one night, once again up to the 3rd floor of The Shining, and he said, you know, they won't tell you what they're thinking. They won't say, we think you and Bob are homosexual. He said, you know, in canon law, there's a great concern about the sin of concupiscence. And I didn't know. Bob didn't tell me that word. But I sort of got that he was saying that Bob and I were too close, our friendship was too loving. And I felt great shame, like Klecko was talking about. And the rector said, just cool it. Mix in other friends. Mix it up, you know, just be with other people. But, you know, we never did anything. We weren't kissing or blowing at each other or anything like that. We were just friends. And but now I was ashamed, and I didn't want to see him anymore. I didn't want to talk to him. And the school year was running out, and I was feeling more and more desperate. I looked to the seminary for, like, protection. You know, a monk in a monastery would be a protected person. But, you know, they'll get you somehow. They'll get you. And as the year wound down, I decided I'm gonna quit. I'm gonna throw it in, which, as you can see, I did. I'll show you my hat shirt. And I went home. My mother was getting crazy, and my brother was going off to college. My sister, of course, was dead. My father had deserted, and I was worried about my younger brother, so I would stay home and sort of keep things from getting too bad. And I became a civilian, no longer a seminarian. Very shortly, I was not even much of a Catholic anymore, and going much more toward the Beatle end of the spectrum and away from the Vatican end of the spectrum. And here's my fun part of the story. It's a transition. 50 years later, that's the transition. 50 years later. Explain these things. 50 years later, I'm on Facebook. And I realized you can find these people from 50 years ago. And I called Bob. I wrote to him, and we also spoke on the phone. I said, Bob, it's so great to talk to you. I said, you know, what happened to us? What was it exactly? And Bob said, well, I said, the rector said that you might be gay. And he said, oh my yes. I was very, very, very gay. I said, that's what they said. And he, in fact, almost went through to ordination. He was like 6 months into the novitiate, and then he quit. He thought it was just not a good idea to go forward. And he became a shaman, and he was doing kind of New Age healing things, part of some Russian healing ritual that he practiced. He was very good at it. He lived in Hawaii. Nice. I sent him my version of what happened, and he's not spoken to me since. I don't know what that's about. I didn't write it for him. I sent it to him after I'd written it. So that's part of the ending of this story. And the other is that I called up my friend Ralph, the guy that told me about the roller coasters. And he says, I'm going to be in St. Paul, Minnesota next weekend. I'd like to see you. I thought, okay. And he has me take him up to the cathedral, St. Paul's. And we go through, and I'm kind of inured to the charms of St. Paul's, but we walk through. And afterwards, he's lit up, and he says, Mike, St. Paul's Cathedral in St. Paul, Minnesota is more beautiful than the Basilica of St. Peter in Rome. I said, what the fuck? How can that be? How can that be? What are you talking about? He says, well, no, I'll tell you what I mean. He said, it's a church, you know, people are in there and they're lighting candles and saying prayers and doing confession and doing all that Catholic stuff. He says, that's really great, that's nice. I said, yes, but architecturally. Anyway, he said, there's one other thing I want to show you. You've shown me the cathedral, I want to show you something. So I drove him down the cathedral hill, down into St. Paul. I think it's Wabasha Avenue. There's the Marist Church of Saints Peter and Paul. That's right next to the Scottish Rite place where Maureen Smith works. And I go in, and it's very beautiful, it's very nice, and it's the Marist, it's the order that I belong to, 50 years later. And he says, follow me, follow me. And we walk back to the sacristy, the back area, and he says, well, what do you think? I look at the wall, and it's the stone mosaic of the pelican. The image that I showed you of the pelican pecking its breast and feeding its babies. I got all emotional. And I started to cry and to laugh at the same time. And I thought, you know, for Ralph to remember me and to remember that would be meaningful to me. And I hugged him. And you will notice I have hugged nobody in this story up to this point. I said, Ralph, thank you for telling me about the roller coasters. And that is my story tonight. Thank you very much for your time. Very thankful to be here.